Welcome, GrayMatter leader, to our unpublished podcast for GrayMatter Career Coaching. I am so delighted that you've chosen to tune in once again and that you've invested some of your time today to engage with us in a conversation that's intended to move you into the leading edge of your life and business as a leader. At GrayMatter, we believe you have the power to activate the part of your brain scientifically known as gray matter. And in so doing, you can take yourself, your life, your career, your business, whatever you care about, out of autopilot thinking and behavior, and finally reach the goals you want. Now, in case you're wondering, my name is Jeanette, and I'm the head of sales and communication here at GMC, and I'm also your host for today's leadership conversation. As always, I'm delighted that I'm joined by my co-host and our founder of GMC, BJ Gray. And today, our topic is something I'm profoundly connected to because it's a path that I feel I get to walk every day. And it's on the topic of self-leadership, specifically in the moment awareness and how we can walk this path of self-leadership more efficiently and effectively. So without further ado, let me bring out BJ Gray to walk us through this. BJ, are you there?
I am. Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Once again, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I love hashing out these topics with you.
Yeah, so our topic is the path to self-leadership. Such a huge fan of this. I'm so glad we get to spend a few minutes just going back and forth and really bringing to our listeners piece of your wisdom on how we can best lead ourselves first, because as you like to teach, you teach this all the time, but more importantly in our mental fitness bootcamp for leaders, it's part of the building foundation that can help us become the kind of leaders that we all know we want to be. And what that building block is mastering the self, or rather you call it self-management, right? Do you want to explain to us a little bit more what you mean by this and how we can develop this skill?
Yeah, I definitely do. And you're right. It is part of building the foundation for becoming a successful leader in today's, workplace, which is a little bit more complex and challenging than ever before. And if you don't, I'm sure many people listening to us have heard, if you can't lead yourself, then you can't lead others. And so mastering self-management has to be one of the first building blocks for leadership, so that you grab that in the moment awareness when something's challenging, when something's in conflict, and you're able to get a grip on yourself first before you react or before you start to work with other associates on the team. And so it takes practice and skill and a level of self-awareness to develop self-management. But I think it is literally the first or second building block to becoming a leader that can, succeed in today's business environment. So yes, it's about really in the moment awareness when you're in a challenging position at work.
And we know there's a lot of that happening today. So maybe let's start off by understanding from you, what are some of the obstacles that are stopping or are preventing employees from really succeeding when it comes to this topic of self-leadership? Because, we see it all the time. It's like on every feed of every social platform, there is something about being a good leader and empathy and knowing yourself. And so even though the quotes are floating all over LinkedIn, we know that it's not really translating into practical reality. Why do you think that is?
I think that the obstacles that stop a lot of people and employees from succeeding at self-leadership are that they're not aware of how to be accountable for how they're thinking and behaving. But then the second part is they don't want to be accountable for how they're thinking and behaving. So once you raise the self-awareness, then it's a matter of like choosing to be accountable for it, right? And then the second thing
Mhm.
is, I think when they're not accountable, they end up just wanting to blame the culture, the work, their boss, their team, and that leaves them actually pretty powerless in that situation. So as a leader, they won't be effective. And there's a third obstacle that I just don't think we'll get to in this conversation. But the third obstacle is, what is a negative emotion and how do
Mhm.
we deal with negative emotions? And that's like a whole podcast in itself, because negative emotions can send us sideways and be an obstacle for leading ourselves in the moment.
I do think emotions are like a hot topic. I'm going to make sure I press for that one to happen as well, because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of myths. I think it would be worthwhile just having you dive deep into emotions in general, and then of course negative emotions. But yeah, thanks for that. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I think the concept of blaming is something we see not just in the workplace, but even with like relationships within the family unit. Um, it comes from this um, lack of taking self-responsibility and accountability for my own actions, isn't it? But the funny thing is how is it that it's so normal for most of us to just blame? Because it happens almost like as a natural instinct. So I can understand why at work the same thing is happening. My question to you now would be, if I do become aware that, okay, maybe I struggle with being accountable, and yeah, maybe once in a while I play the victim, uh, what can I do? Like, how can I then start transforming that so that I can get into better mental shape?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Our knee-jerk reaction, our humanness is to want to blame others right away when we don't feel good, right? And
Mhm.
when we feel very justified that the way we're thinking is the right way, it's the first thing you're going to do is blame somebody else that their thinking isn't the right way. And so it's super natural to fall into this pattern of blaming. But if you notice, the minute you start blaming, nobody wants to cooperate, or just
Yes.
the natural energy of the room isn't cooperating. You've got to take a
Yes.
pause and look at yourself and say, why am I blaming, or what am I missing? And the way you get out of the blaming mode is to, one, take accountability for that awful emotion that you're feeling, because really someone's just triggered your emotion, right? So how do you take responsibility for that emotion? And two, you sort of develop this intuition of curiosity. Like, how do you immediately go into, like, what are they trying to tell me, or what can I control or not control in this situation? What should I drop and just let go of, and what should I try to like maintain some sort of connection to? So it's like really being able to study your immediate environment super fast and
Mhm.
realize that that negative emotion is all on you, and you got to
Mhm.
raise your self-awareness to why you're triggered. Why did that push your buttons?
I see. Okay, so do you have like an example story you could give us here? Something to help us connect to um, exactly how to catch ourselves, because I think sometimes it's hard to catch myself, or at least
Mhm.
before I make the mess, before it becomes a complete mess. Is there like an example you could give us of warning signs before I flip that lid?
Yeah, I have a couple examples. One of them is just my own story, and I'll share that. I think I've shared it before, but there was a moment that I was in a conversation with a senior leader, and we were talking about who was responsible for what work, right? And
Mhm.
in that moment, he was telling me that I wasn't picking up the pieces, I wasn't doing my part, and I wasn't doing it well. And it immediately triggered, wait a minute, I'm not good enough. Wait a minute, you're making my
Mhm.
self-esteem, sink, blah, blah, blah. But what was really happening was that he could have been right in that conversation, but it triggered something from a very personal thing that was happening in my life outside of work, and it reminded
Mhm.
me immediately to get defensive, because outside of work I was in a situation that I was responding to that same kind of conversation. And so I think
Mhm.
it just triggered this natural, this feels familiar, go into defense mode and blame him for that he's wrong. This is not what we signed up for, right? And I
Yeah.
became sort of, not even sort of, I did become pretty aggressive in my conversation, and it didn't end well. It didn't end well for him. We didn't get what we needed to accomplish. It didn't end well for me. And so in
Okay.
that moment, if I could have like noticed that I was getting triggered and taken a big deep breath, maybe even asked to have the conversation in 15 minutes to an hour later, we would have had a more productive conversation. The other
Mhm.
place that I see this happen is if you're a leader and you have an associate who needs to improve, or you just need them to like change something in how they're doing their job, or you want to give them some advice or some guidance on how to improve, right?
Mhm.
If that associate takes that as, oh my God, I'm getting in trouble, I'm going to get fired, and they have some sort of past relationship or trigger with money, like they weren't raised with money, or they're very insecure about money and finances, that will instantly trigger get defensive because I can't lose my job, because I can't lose my livelihood, right? And that's a super
Mhm.
familiar place for
Yes.
many of us. If your boss is giving you guidance, advice, feedback, whatever you want to call it, and it triggers something about, oh my God, maybe I'm going to get fired, I'm not doing a good job, then you're naturally going to get into this, like you're not going to lead yourself well in that moment. And then the leader might not lead themselves well, right? So the leader
Mhm.
needs to actually know what is triggering my employee right now. So that's when the leader needs to be in control of their own emotions and reactions to this employee, and really try to lean in with an outward mindset to that employee who's struggling to take this feedback. You can't have two people not leading themselves well, or it's really going to implode. But it's natural for a younger associate to be triggered then, and the older, the leader, the mentor, the one giving the guidance, needs to really be in control of themselves and not be threatened by this employee blaming them. It's a huge dynamic. It's crazy how, if leaders can't lead themselves, then they won't be able to lead anybody in the culture effectively.
I see that even in the family unit, quite frankly,
Mhm.
where how the mom responds to an unpleasant situation, especially if you have like older children, when
Mhm.
they tell you something you don't want to hear, and that happens quite a bit. That response is actually the one that determines the end result, and not necessarily so much the subject itself. So like if I just overreact and I flip my lid and I don't respond and have a reaction, I might actually end up creating an outcome that would have never been there to begin with, had I just been a bit more composed and taken the time to not just think um, uh, out of a hot temper, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. What do you think? Why do you think children don't tell their parents the truth? They know their parents aren't going to be able to control their emotions in that moment, right? So they will
Yeah.
circumvent the truth just to not experience their parents not leading themselves well in that moment. In that moment, yeah, that's exactly right. It
So
happens all the time in the family unit.
in the corporate world, it's so the corporate world is almost like just a big family where, in as much as we're there and it's business and it's tactical and it's structured and there's processes and all that stuff, we're still human beings, and it's pretty much the same human experience that we're having. We're just having it in a setting that we call the corporate environment.
Yeah. Yeah. You're totally right. I mean, basically, when you go to work, it is your family, it's your work family. And it's the same exact. Life and work are so parallel. What triggers us in the workplace is what's triggering us in our personal life. And I think it
Yeah.
boils down to being aware of your own baggage, checking it at the door when you come to work, and then
Mm-hmm.
having some sort of program or tool that you can, when someone disagrees with you, you don't react with your ego. And
Yes.
then pretty much like having another tool. I say stoic mindset. Some people say have a tool for how you receive new information, have a framework for when you receive new information, you're able to process whatever emotion might arise from that information. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really like self-leadership is taking in new information and responding to it in a way that is emotionally mature.
Mm, I love it. And I know you've already mentioned this just now, but you've kind of like gone through it not in necessarily a systematic way. So it'd be great if you could summarize for us. So because we want to win. We want to win in the current complex business environment. We want to win in our relationships. Give us those top mental shaping ideas that you have that we could like start using right now. Like if you could summarize them into like 1, 2, 3, 4, what would that be?
Well, I think the first thing is just raise your self-awareness about potential triggers that just are innate in your personality. And the second thing is, when you understand yourself, you check that baggage at the door before you walk into work. You kind of leave those triggers somewhere else. And then
Yeah.
third, when you're in a conversation, when you're disagreeing, or you're trying to come to an understanding of where somebody's coming from, you really need to check your ego. It's maybe not about you necessarily, it's about what's going on with them or the workplace. And then the third thing is to adopt this stoic mindset, which is to basically, you can only control your reaction to a situation, but you can't control certain elements of the circumstance. And recognizing what you can control and what you can't is really powerful. And then the third thing is, or the fourth thing, which goes hand in hand with stoic mindset, is it's about learning how to process new information that you're receiving coming in. And the benefits of all of this is that not only are you going to have better mental health, but you're going to be more in control of the outcome of a situation. You're going to be more in control of the decisions that need to be made in that moment. So self-leadership is the only way a healthy culture is going to be built. That is the first step, is everyone in the culture needs to lead themselves well before you can join together as like that one unit, team, family, whatever you want to call it. Does that answer
So
your question?
even totally, even this, you're a huge advocate for building a healthy culture. All of that has to stem from, we can only build a healthy culture when we are, first of all, mastering our own self-management effectively. Is that
Totally.
right? And
Yeah,
I
I mean,
know, you just gave a presentation here. I'm going to let you wind up with the story of the recent presentation, because I think that was very insightful, and I think it can help all of us understand this concept better. But go ahead, and then please share that story with us.
yeah, so I was brought into a company recently to talk about how to win in today's business environment. And I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about being in mental shape. And my two favorite parts of being in mental shape is self-awareness and self-leadership. And so when I gave this presentation, I started with the subject of self-leadership and being accountable for your emotions, and how you're thinking and behaving. And many of the attendees were disappointed that they had to look at themselves, that they had to look at how they were controlling their emotions, because they really wanted me to understand that no, the reason why it's not working in this company is because of all these other reasons. They felt very justified that they have good reasons for why things weren't working, and it was not them, it was their boss, it was the culture, just like what I was saying when I was talking about my own example. So they really didn't like the message. I mean, I heard not the best feedback after I gave the presentation, and they just weren't ready to receive it. And it goes back to the key obstacles that hold us back from developing this crucial skill of self-leadership, is that when you're not able to see that you're part of the solution to anything that's going wrong in the workplace or your life, then you won't be open to the information that even I was giving them, right? How to develop self-awareness and self-leadership. So If you can't receive it, then you're not going to operate from a growth mindset, and there's no way you're going to become a better you, or you're going to be better at your job.
That's really powerful stuff. And of course, we dive deep into self-awareness, self-leadership, and so much more in our upcoming online course, which I know we're going to be talking about a few episodes from now. So I'm really, really thrilled about that. But there is one thing I want to mention that I think we can already share with all our listeners, and especially our inner circle. You've created some amazing free resources. That one of them is noticing your lenses, right?
Yeah. So
Would
yeah,
you,
go
share with
on.
us a little bit more about why that particular exercise is important? And we'll, I'll circulate it for everyone to have. But tell us a little bit more about why that kind of exercising every day is really important.
Because I think people don't know what self-awareness really is and how do you gain self-awareness. And so I developed this quick little worksheet so that every day someone can reflect back on something they've experienced and run through a series of questions. It's super fast. It'll take 15 minutes at the most. And you run through a series of questions that actually ask you questions so that you can define the filter you were receiving that information through, or filtering that information through. And that will start to show you your triggers, the lens that you, the bias, the lenses that you like take in information through, because that is exactly why you're reacting. That is exactly why you have these emotions and you want to blame other people. And so that is the first place to start with, is noticing the lenses that you're taking in this information, or how you respond to situations. And so this is a worksheet that can be done daily, it can be done weekly, but you're definitely going to go through many moments in your day where you receive information and it will be filtered through a lens. And that lens is your reason for reacting in the moment.
Beautiful. BJ Gray, it's always so amazing listening to you, having these types of conversations with you. I appreciate everything you do so much. Are you going to come back and discuss with us some more? Next time, negative emotions.
Yeah, we should get into negative emotions. Those are really fun to deal with.
For sure, for sure. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. And to all our listeners, this has been one of my best conversations so far. So thank you.